Hey everyone, Hamish here once again. I hope you're well. Welcome to another Philosophical Glimpse. This is the series where I look at one of my favourite philosophical concepts, I explain it in brief, and I offer my own thoughts on the matter. Today we're going to be approaching one of the most famous philosophical propositions in history. From Frenchman René Descartes, I think, therefore I am, or in Latin, cogito ergo sum. Like many, for some time I misunderstood this statement. I don't want to point any fingers of blame, but about 5 years ago I remember asking my mum what this meant, and she presented it in such a way that Descartes was saying that really all that can be valued is our ability to think. I mean, that's what distinguishes us from animals, and what is life, what is existence if we can't comprehend it? But that is not really accurate at all. Really, Descartes' proposal extends far deeper. So deep, in fact, that it can be traced to our very existence. If you've currently got a seamless view of reality and your place in it, honestly, I wouldn't go rushing in to learn this concept, as it could just topple that lovely framework you've worked out for yourself. This is a powerful concept which undermines much of what we take for granted and much of what we think we know. Anyhow, this idea appears in Descartes' work Meditations on First Philosophy, which was published in Latin in 1641. Today it is readily available on the internet. I myself have listened to the LibriVox recording, which I highly recommend. I've actually put a link in the description as it's free to access. And I must say, this is one of my favourite philosophical texts. It's quite listenable, it's very meditative, it lives up to its title, and the setting is very chilled out. I mean, Descartes is sitting by his fire on his lounge chair, and over a set of winter nights, he tears down his perspective on reality and replaces it with his view on truth. It must be said that Descartes portrays himself as a really admirable individual. It's as if he's this explorer, delving into the world of reality in order to see what he can find to be true. He writes, "Since I am in the secure possession of leisure in a peaceable retirement, I will at length apply myself earnestly and freely to the general overthrow of all my former opinions." Descartes' quest for truth stems from his experiences whilst dreaming. He realizes that when dreaming, he can be so fooled by his senses that what is to stop his reality from being similarly deluded? At the beginning of his meditations, Descartes is essentially a philosophical skeptic, that is, one who believes nothing to be true. He further emphasizes how his senses can belie him in what is known as the candle wax argument. He takes this candle, he identifies its form and figure, he perceives it by striking his finger against it, by feeling how firm it is, and then he proceeds to put this candle near the fire. He watches it melt, he watches it disintegrate, until it's really not recognizable as a candle anymore. I mean, no longer does it make a sound when he strikes it, no longer is it solid in his hands, and yet he realizes that it is still a candle. There is something else at play here. There is his mind. Now that candle wax argument appears later in the work. I've just brought it up now to establish Descartes' disbelief in his senses, but having lost faith in his senses, he's left with a vacuum. What can he consider to be true? In order to reach this understanding, he employs a really interesting thought experiment, one which I think is quite ingenious. He says, "Suppose that some malignant demon, who is at once exceedingly potent and deceitful, has employed all his artifice to deceive me. I will suppose that the sky, the air, the earth, colours, figures, sounds, and all external things are nothing better than the illusions of dreams, by means of which this being has laid snares for my credulity." Just take a moment to consider this. It is shocking. Descartes' entire reality, the physical world itself, has just evaporated before his eyes. Just dropping in from the future to say that Descartes now realizes there is nothing to prevent an evil demon from convincing him that an illusory world is real. Even Descartes' own body, which until now he viewed as being obviously existent, could be nothing more than an illusion. What has he left to hold onto? And his response to these doubts is so human and so relatable. He says, "The meditation of yesterday has filled my mind with so many doubts that it is no longer in my power to forget them. Nor do I see, meanwhile, any principle on which they can be resolved. And, just as if I had fallen all of a sudden into very deep water, I am so greatly disconcerted as to be unable either to plant my feet firmly on the bottom or sustain myself by swimming on the surface." This is a man now haunted by how doubtful reality is. But Descartes, still with some courage left, strides onwards in his pursuit of the truth. And he reaches a conclusion which is at once heartening, axiomatic, and revelatory. This is where "I think, therefore I am" really comes into being. He writes, "Doubtless then I exist, since I am deceived. And let him, the evil demon, deceive me as he may, he can never bring it about that I am nothing, so long as I shall be conscious that I am something. So that it must, in fine, be maintained, all things being maturely and carefully considered, that this proposition, I am, I exist, is necessarily true each time it is expressed by me, or conceived in my mind. So there we have it. With I think, therefore I am, Descartes is providing a clear and definitive basis of certainty in a highly doubtful world. I should mention that this idea isn't really unique to Descartes. Most people forget to credit the Islamic philosopher Avicenna, who in the Islamic Golden Age came up with this wonderful falling man experiment. He asked us to wonder, if someone was falling in a vacuum, in utter darkness, though none of their senses would be engaged, they could still be sure that they existed, and so he identified that there was a distinction between mind and body. But at the end of the day, it is Descartes who takes the title as history's leading dualist guy, and there's a reason for that. He was around in the Enlightenment era, and the Enlightenment, as a movement, prioritized reason as the means of acquiring truth. He really was one of the great rationalists, and his ideas would, for some time to come, present an obstacle to empiricists, that is, those who believe that truth can be acquired through sensory observation. As for my own thoughts on this concept, well, it's one of the few unquestionable pieces of philosophy. It's shaped the way I see the world quite significantly, and honestly, I do grapple with coming to terms with what is real in the world. I sincerely hope that the material world is there. I am frightened by the prospect of you not existing, or this camera not existing, even though I can perceive it physically, and I do hope I never descend into being a solipsist. I want to have trust in the material world, and I don't want to let my mind think too much of itself and start dismissing everything that can't be 100% verified as existing. I think it could be one of the greatest conflicts that a human has, to balance the material world and the mind. That concludes this episode of A Philosophical Glimpse. I really hope you've enjoyed. I would love to receive any comments you might have, but specifically I have two questions to ask. First, and more broadly, how do you see reality? And second, how much faith do you have in the physical world? Please let me know. I love being in a position where I can ask these kind of questions. A link to my Facebook page is in the description. Subscribe for more of these videos, and I'll see you next time. Farewell.